And okay, so I have to watch what I say here now, so I don't embarrass myself too much. My name is Fred Cahoon. I've been involved with this university for over 10 years, probably longer than that, maybe closer to 15 years. And I am becoming more and more involved, and you'll probably see me being more and more involved. But let me tell you that this course is my version, my lecture of this knowledge management course. I'm very much into the role that culture plays in knowledge management, and I have my own particular approach to this. And so, what I want to talk today is I have a bunch of slides, and hopefully, you'll ask questions and you'll see where I'm progressing on this, and then get into a few more mechanical aspects of it. From my point of view, the way I work and what I do is I will ask you and ask for your views on these things because you represent different entities. So we have two of you are from Kenya, one and one from Ghana, and I have had students in the past from both of those countries. A number of them from Nigeria. I know more about Nigeria than I ever wanted to know because one of my PhD students eventually became ambassador to both the Congo and then to Nigeria, only woman to have a U.S. ambassadorship to two African countries. So I had the dubious pleasure of being quoted or being released when the WikiLeaks went out as part of our conversations, because she would run difficult issues by me just to vent, and I would give my opinion. So I know more about Africa than I ever thought I wanted to know. So I am fairly fluent in African politics and economics and culture to a certain extent, and the changes and the difficulties and challenges. But let me give you a little bit about me so you know where I'm coming from. I am currently at Robert Morris University. I'm trying to move more into more research to get out of my daily tasks. I've been here for 41 years. I like to say I've been here since Christ had the rank of corporal. Forever. I came here very young after teaching at Penn State for 6 years, and I was at the University of Pittsburgh before that. I was the youngest person ever hired by Pennsylvania State University, and I was an economist. I started my education at Georgetown University, and that's where my love for internationalization came in because it's a very much internationally known institution. And so it changed my life forever. I came from a relatively small town in the state of Ohio, and then I went to Washington, D.C., and then pursued my academic career. I started off in a PhD program at a very young age in economics. I wrote 3 dissertations because my first one was in economics. I then went on to get another PhD program in information science, and then I did my last one in applied technology about what makes technology diffusion successful at Carnegie Mellon University. So I am, if anything, more qualified than anybody else, having successes and failures in 3 PhD programs, having to go on through and write 3 dissertations. So I've done every different methodology that there is to do. I have been quite fluent in a lot of business areas. I have done a lot of work. I've been as part of a school of engineering, part of a school of business, and part of a school of informatics where I am currently located. I have been a faculty member. I've been a department chair. I've been a dean. I've been a vice provost. I decided my best place is to be a professor. And so I've written maybe over 150 articles, have been published all over the world, and I have many, many citations. And it's interesting, and I'll give you this advice, that the citations that I have, I didn't think they were the papers I was most proud of, but it's the one that people find most useful or interesting for them. So whatever you think is academic and important may not be important to the rest of the world. So keep that in mind as we go through this process. This program is very was based upon the program I started at my university here. And so it's very much applied in nature. Your research is to take a problem and work with real world data as opposed to a purely theoretical approach. Hello, Sheila, you entered. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm recording this so you can catch up. We're just talking small talk. Where are you located? Could you turn your camera on for a
In
second, just so we can see who you are? I like to see faces.
okay, I'm in
There you,
Uganda,
yeah,
in
there you go.
Kampala.
Yes. Where are you located?
In Uganda, in Kampala.
Uganda. Yes. Okay. So it's another one of our students. I become again. I was telling everyone I know more about Africa than I ever thought I wanted to know because of all my students over the years.
Mhm.
But thank you. But I was just going over my background, and I started off as an economist, became an information scientist, and then lastly became involved with the dissemination of technology and got into knowledge management. And so that's my real true love and passion. And a lot of my work has been based upon culture and trying to bring diverse ideas together to understand how we can change organizations. And when I say culture, we're not talking necessarily about national cultures. We're talking about even corporate cultures and even professional cultures. Engineers have a different mindset than do accountants, as do people who are very much into human resources, as opposed to people who are into finance, for example. So we have all these cultures interacting, and they influence how we express, how we save, and how we grow with our knowledge overall. The US, for as much as we have here, is in a very difficult place. And I'll talk about this later on, and maybe next time we meet more detail. But the US has very relatively little knowledge transfer from the corporate level. We used to have quite a bit when the government sponsored research. In the past 30 years, we have become more privatized under the capitalist regime, or the capitalist philosophy, I should say, that we have developed something called NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that when you get hired, when you leave a company, you cannot talk about what you learned and what you acquired at that company from a mental standpoint. And as a result, people reinvent the wheel continually. But the rest of the world, knowledge transfer is a part of life. As you stay, as you work, as you grow, you try to share what you know to do things better. For instance, in the United States, professionals stay in an organization, an institution, on average 2.5 years. In Europe, it's 30 years. So there's been a lot of legal cases saying that you cannot take what I have up here and be not allow me to speak my mind because it's who I am, and I'll address this. So it's an interesting perspective on this. So the purpose of this program is to have an overriding umbrella of knowledge and yet customize it for your individual research interests and needs based upon what you do and what you want to do later on in your careers. And so part of the plan of this program, which you've heard, and I'll reiterate, is that we try to get you to realize that you will publish an article or two or three, one a year approximately, based upon your research. And you can do this into professional culture, culturally oriented conferences. There's one that's out of Slovenia that I participate, Make Learn. There's a number of them elsewhere in the world. IASIS, the nice thing is a lot of them are virtual now, that you can participate from overseas. Or if you involve one of your colleagues or faculty members that are in different countries, they can present along with you. I'm a believer in writing and publishing in teams, in doing co-authorships, because you help each other out, you learn to do that, and then you get the skill sets to be able to do this on your own. So that is not a problem for me, but you can do it individually or with your colleagues. That works very well to get get it across. But my goal is to talk about knowledge management from a different point of view. And so what I'm going to, please at any time interrupt me. If you want to interrupt me and say something or ask a question, just please use the tools and do so. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to do is bring up the show. Can you all see this? Yes or no, please?
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
I can't. The problem with this is I can't see you when I do this. So I'm just bringing up the shell right now to see how I have it set up. I have it on editing mode right now, but I have mine's looks a little different than what you have on your web page. But I have put on two particular slideshows. I will post the recording here after all done, and I put a number of study materials that I reference in my slides. And I have also put hot links to videos that you can do on your own time, so you don't have to be bored me trying to struggle with the technology and have to deal with that. But for today, I want to take this this little slideshow that I have kind of prepared as a basis for discussion. And again, please let me know if you have any questions or concerns on this. I'm just making sure you're all still there, because I know you're going to disappear when I show this because I can't see you. It's kind of weird how I can see everything but this. But anyway, I have to. This is crazy. I have to constantly. I can't jump around like this. But I'm going to go back into my slides, and I'll show you essentially what my whole experience has been. First thing that people ask me, what's knowledge? What's information? What's data? And I like to use this simple children's diagram to say that knowledge really is all these disparate things that we have collected over a lifetime. It's influenced by who we are, what our education is, how we grew up, who we befriended, what our profession has become. All these items are in the back of our minds. We have it sitting there. Experience connects those little knowledge items. As we experience life, do things, get formalized education, connections start to be formed. Creativity, which is the highest level of applying this knowledge, is taking the knowledge and experience and doing different things with it. So I just think this is kind of an interesting way to approach this. And it's my job to get you to go beyond this knowledge, to get you to go beyond experience and move you into the realm of creativity. My goal is not to get you to be a parrot of what I say, but rather to take what I say and build on that and make it better and to develop individualized theories for that. So I'd like to start off just indicating, and again, please stop me if you have a question. Knowledge management, as we know it, started in the 1990s. It's been around forever. We've always had it, but people like to associate it with the involvement and role of computerization and information systems. In 1995 is when we really started coining the phrase knowledge management in a functional way for business purpose. And two gentlemen, a guy named Davenport and Prusik, had written a number of articles that started talking about it. And essentially their claims were that it's expert driven, people know something, and they were able to capture what they knew and put it in databases, put it in books, put it into manuals and white papers. In 1999, it moved from the realm of personal into the realm of how do we codify this and classify this so others can use it who do not have personal connections with me. And so we have a professionalization of this. So we use conferences, we use communities of practice and peers to be able to share what they knew. And in this case, we move into the recognition and realm of what we call tacit knowledge. Tacit is the stuff that I know, but may not particularly articulate it in a way that it can be put into a database or a book. But I can show people, I can work with people, and that's where that peer-driven comes about. Then around 2007, it moved into the notion of collaboration with the development of tools like particularly the iPhone. And with the iPhone coming into play and technology coming into play and collaborative tools coming into play, at the time, it was Lotus Notes was developed. And organizations now realize that ideas could be shared across organizations. People can add to it. Shareware became available. All these tools developed at that point in time. We have Google Docs. We have Google as a tool. All these tools evolved. And then around 2018, we moved into the relevant, which we'll spend a good part of this program talking about, the AI machine language era, where we get into big data driven analytics and AI supported business decisions. And to me, this is the most frightening, because this is where we have actually taken our individual biases and have actually systematized them. And once you take and capture data or knowledge or management that tends to be biased, it gets systematized. There's no DNA marker to know what's real and what's not real, what's biased and what's not biased. So let me move out of here for a second. I'm going to probably have to jump back in because this isn't very good that way, but any questions so far? Again, I'm recording this for those of you that jumped in. I'm Fred Kohun. So please, this is participative. So when you come in, interrupt me when you can or when you want to, all the way around. So I see we have Joseph in here. Joseph, you there? Could I see you for a second? Can you show your camera? There you go. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, sir.
Where are you located?
I'm in the coastal town of Kenya, Mombasa.
Kenya also.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, Mumin, could you show yourself too? How are you? Where are you located?
Yes, thank you, Professor. I'm based in Tunisia.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, again, I'm recording this, so you'll have access to the comments I made up front. So later on, you can do that yourself. Excellent. Okay, forgive first. Who? Oh, you have two things going on here. I'm confused. Who is that? You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, this is Felix. I had low battery on my phone. I had low battery, so I changed it.
Okay, just making sure. I want to make sure everybody has a chance. Okay, excellent. Okay, I'll go back to doing what I was doing. I'm going to have to go jump through my slides again. This is kind of crazy that I have to kind of jump in and out, but so I apologize for this, but we'll go through this. I'll figure this out later. But where I left off was when we talk about, let me blow this up again so y'all can see this. Considerations for success in a knowledge management world where we have technology and people. It's really about the people. But essentially, we know people represent how you work together. That's the most important thing in an organization. We have processes that we established so we don't have chaos. So there are best practices and governance to identify, manage, and disseminate what we know. So it's good and it's solid and it hopefully helps people in doing their jobs. We have technology that helps you to configure, use tools, and hopefully to make our time more efficient. But I debate this all the time. Technology is a wonderful thing. We're able to have this course doing it virtually, but we have to struggle getting in, dealing with things like bandwidth, having to negotiate, etc. Structure. Organization structure is very important in terms of how we can exchange this within and across organizations. But to me, and I think what's key is culture. It embodies how you establish and cultivate a knowledge-sharing environment or a knowledge-driven culture. Again, that being said, we do have challenges that are enormous. The inability to recognize articulate knowledge. I know things that I have a difficult time sharing or trying to explain so that you might understand this. A good friend of mine was going through a terrible breakup of his marriage, and he was seeing somebody to help him go through this, a psychologist. So he asked me if I would go with him to see the psychologist. So I went to the psychologist with him. I'm waiting in the hallway. He's talking to the psychologist. Psychologist says, "Come on in. My friend John was talking about me more than his soon-to-be ex-wife." So he said, "Tell me about yourself." Well, I had my computer. I said, "Here's my resume, my CV." And it's like 20 pages long. And then I had a list of all the things that I felt that I had to work on individually. I showed it to him. He looked at it for a minute, took his glasses off, and he looks at me and he says, "You're the kind of guy that goes out there and says, if you explain something to somebody, what you think is right in different ways, mathematically, visually, through words, through different languages, that people will eventually get it and understand." And I go, boy, this guy is really good. He really understands what I'm about. He looks at me again and says, "You're absolutely wrong. I've been doing this for 46 years. And less than 5% of the population has the ability to see things as systems, to see how things interconnect, to see how things happen. It's not that the other 95% are stupid or foolish, but the fact that those people are in fact not capable of it. They're not wired that way. They see things in mathematical terms. They see things in visual terms, but can't see things as systems. I'm telling you this because this tacit knowledge, trying to convert it to explicit, you have to have somebody on the other side that has the ability or the tools to be able to take that and understand that. And PhD programs are designed to try to get you into that top 5% and be able to articulate what you know and reach and touch other individuals. Does everybody understand that? That's a real important point. We have geographical distances and language barriers, particularly in international companies, particularly within regions. The United States has barriers. I really go out of my way to learn a few words and learn about cultural languages. And so I know a few, so I can at least say hello, thank you, all the important words, please. We have to understand the limitations of information and communication technologies. We have to realize that our loosely defined area of expertise change. We're experts for only a short period of time. We have to keep learning and adding to our expertise. And we realize that everybody doesn't have the same expertise. So we have to be generalized specialists. We have to deal with internal conflicts, this professional territoriality. I always at my universities, especially when I was a vice president, have to fight with the finance people. They speak a different language. They cannot see the big picture, the big goals of the organizations from my point of view. Lack of incentives or performance or management goals. Why do people do what they do? I'm an academic. I don't do what I do for money. I do what I do to impact other people, to share what I know, to get people to outperform me. We have to deal with poor training and mentoring, and we have to provide mentoring for those that need to be mentored. And that's a tough one. And lastly, cultural barriers, which are very strong. We have leadership that do things because that's how they've always done it. And there's internal and hidden biases, and I'll talk about that shortly. So is everybody with me on this? Everybody have any questions at this point in time? Please, somebody ask something, say something, say, we get it,
yes.
We understand it. So, okay.
Yes,
so
I would like to maybe if you can more emphasize on among the consideration for success, you have mentioned culture, and there are organizational culture and also a culture that is developed through systematic use of knowledge of the organization. So how do you differentiate this, and which one are you referring to?
But that's what the whole rest of my talk is going to be talking about. That I will go through that, and I will go and talk about different levels here. And the way I do this, there's a man named Logan who had written a book called Tribal Leadership. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but it's a very interesting approach to this. You can Google this. He does a wonderful YouTube presentation to talk about his book, used by organizations throughout the world, very well known. And he talks about tribes, tribal leadership, goals of tribal leadership. And what I'm going to do is bring knowledge management into that little discussion. But you set the stage to go through for me to talk about this. But Logan talks about tribes in general, and there's a number of quotes and a number of ways of looking at it. But one of the quotes I like, it's the empowerment of a community for a noble cause with the mutual respect for core values. And so when you're talking about corporate culture, you're talking about national culture, if you don't have core values that are shared, you're not going to have a tribe, and you're not going to have empowerment.
Unaishi town? Oh,
Pardon me?
niko class mpaka saa 2 but angalia WhatsApp yako.
You should be on mute if you're talking to someone, please. Okay. People naturally form tribes, and tribes are the basic building block of large human efforts. And technically, it's between 20 and 150 people. In the world, we like to call smaller groups teams, but it can be a tribe if it's a small organization. But tribes always have more power than a leader. It could put a leader into place. It could take a leader out. It could make a leader fail. It can make a leader successful. And then the questions are out there is what makes some tribes more successful than others? And what does this is the tribe's culture. And tribes emerge from the language people use to describe themselves, their jobs, and others. And so going back to my statement about organizations, accountants use different language than engineers use. And engineers use different language than economists use. And managers use different language than human resource people use. And so what we have to learn to do is to be able to reduce our languages to the common denominator that everybody tends to understand that. So Logan develops a model, which is fascinating, which I'll go through, and it's called his tribal leadership model. And this is his model. His book's all about this. And he says organizations can be of one of 5 levels. The lowest level is level 1. The highest level is level 5. The first level is the level of alienation. Hello, you have a question? Level 1 is alienation, and it's 2% of all organizations. In his first level, the individuals are there. They are isolated. They don't talk to each other. They have a pretty negative attitude because the organization does not bring them together. They are not part of anything. They are individuals that might be part of a very dismal situation, personal situation. 2% of all organizations, based on Logan's research, are at level 1. Very terrible place to be. 25% of organizations are on level 2, where you have potentially good people, but they're isolated, they're siloed out. A lot of people will argue that when COVID came around and people started working from home, people might have been in level 3 and dropped down to level 2. They work separately, and then they start thinking that their individual life sucks, to use Logan's terms. It's not a good place to be, but I have a job, but the organization might be good, but I'm isolated. I'm doing things on my own. I don't really have a corporate or a cultural sense of community with my organization. Level 3 is where 50% close to of all organizations fall. The organization is doing well. I'm doing well personally, but level 3 is where we have this notion of personal domination. And the persona is that the only way you're going to get ahead is at the expense of somebody else. So you try to justify that your viewpoint is the correct one and the others may not be as good as yours. And so there's an internal political competition going on. So the culture is there, but it's one of a little bit of conflict, and management takes advantage of this to make individuals perform better by having you compete with your peers. Level 4 is a stable partnership. 22%, some of the best corporations are in this one. This is where there's a notion that everybody is working together. Apple Corporation was one of those that people said was one of those stable partnerships. Google had been, but now that had broken down. People are claiming because it's gotten too large, and then they started breaking down a little bit. And then level 5, the ultimate level, only 2% of organizations are there, where everybody is working. The organization is running smoothly. It's going well. Everybody is really on top of the game. The goal is to be at level 4 or hopefully level 5. But the reality is we're at level 3, competing with each other, taking our energies to compete with each other instead of working together to make things better. This is Logan's tribal leadership model. I think it's kind of interesting. You please take a look at this later and think about this a little bit. But the idea of tribal leadership is to upgrade groups, clusters of people from stage to stage. You want to improve, want to go to a higher level. While tribal leaders do their work for the good of the group, they're rewarded with loyalty, hard work, and innovation and collaboration. So the idea is that leadership shouldn't be looking above them to their superiors, but rather for the people below them as well. It's a two-way street. In the olden days, they gave examples when they did their research of Bill Gates when he built up Microsoft. When Bill Gates was leading at the time, Microsoft grew. Since he has gone, Microsoft is going through different growing pains and political pressures. Steve Jobs, when he was alive, brought Apple because of his creativeness and because of his ability to see where technologies should be beyond what was currently available. The United States just gave U2 and Bono the Lifetime Achievement Award and honors at the Kennedy Center because he had this ability to bring people together, look at bigger issues that went beyond Ireland, where his native place. And Nelson Mandela was an example of a tribal elder to look beyond his personal needs to see a bigger mission overall. So the idea is to contribute to a goal, not just tribal causes, something bigger than the immediate. Now, how do you bring knowledge management into this together? I would argue that knowledge creation is essential to knowledge management and organizational learning. Knowledge creation is a collective effort in a tribal setting. So you have to be able and willing to talk about what you do, both right and wrong, because knowing what's wrong helps you to do something that's right in the future or something that's better in the future. Tacit knowledge, the knowledge that I have here from my experience, from who I am, is embodied in individual minds and requires engagement for sharing and conversion. So for me to be able to share what I know, I have to find like minds to kind of relate to, be able to translate what I do and how I do it so others can be able to understand and appreciate it. And explicit knowledge is explicitly codified via words which directly influence people's mindsets, attitude, and behavior. And we do have words now that have developed that we can throw out in our organization certain words or concepts that have direct meanings. In my environment here, we have something, the culture of assessment. assessment means one thing: to evaluate and provide some sort of reinforcement that what I'm doing is what really is being achieved. Each organization, each profession has their own codified words by which they do this. And this develops their mindset, attitude, and behavior. When I throw out the word ethics, when I throw out the words intellectual property or intellectual ownership, these have different concepts for different professions, etc. I used to be a believer in accreditation. I brought to this university 2 worldwide renowned accreditations: ABET, the Accreditation Board of Engineering Technologies, and AACSB, the Accreditation Standards for Collegiate Schools of Business. I thought this was the way to go. It was a uniform language, a uniform way of evaluating data, etc. And my recent research has shown that since we have gone to international standardized accreditation as delivered through university curriculum, now everywhere in the world, somebody is seeing problems in the same way. They're evaluating data in the same way. Terminology means the same thing across the board. That works well in medicine, where a white blood count that is low or high that means it's bad, where a red blood cell count that's low means it's bad. They could see that. But in a business world, when you had local thoughts involved, when you had local processing involved in that, it was counter-cyclical that what may have gone on in the world. Now, since we have standardization for economic data, looking at data, and businesses are now multinational, they look at data the same way, and now we have global recessions and global inflations as we're experiencing right now because of this standardization. So this is an interesting area of research to see how localization versus globalization in terms of knowledge management, the advantages and disadvantages of this. Okay, moving from a lower stage to a higher requires a new knowledge, change of languages. You have to have an open mind to see what younger people are learning, particularly in social media and the role of social media in our world. And likewise, it's the older generations that need to talk about ethical standards, ways of approaching tradition and using tradition also in that context. Mentorship and coaching has become a big deal in the United States. We have gone a long way by providing individual mentorship. When a new faculty comes into my university, I'm the one usually charged with providing mentorship for research, for getting involved in university, and particularly with teaching. I show what I have learned, the mistakes that I have made, as well as some of the successes that I have experienced. So tribal leaders focus on building cultures of higher conscience by upgrading language, in our case, technical language. So it means the same thing for everything. So we are talking on the same page. One of my PhD students worked for a big consulting firm, Deloitte Touche. He had his number one client was IBM. He had found every initiative with IBM had a 50% failure rate. His PhD project was to understand why there was a failure rate, and he was struggling. So I said, talk to me about what you do in your job. I'm a good listener, and I listened, and he was saying something, and then I said, excuse me, Deloitte Touche is involved with business process. Is that correct? He goes, yes. IBM is involved with systems engineering and systems process. Correct. You have similar words like system. You have process. They meant 2 different things to the business side and as compared to the engineering side. And as a result, even though they were using the same words, they were not communicating with each other and they had different expectations. He developed an instrument, found out this was the case. Now they established a common terminology, a nomenclature, a lexicon by which they exchanged ideas, and the failure rate dropped to less than 5% when they worked together with different cultures, who had different professional backgrounds in their projects. But that's what they mean about bringing together 2 different cultures by trying to upgrade these concepts so everybody sees things in the same way. So here's a summary slide putting what I just said together here. The low performance organizations focus on stages 1, 2, and 3. The high performance organizations focus on stages 4 and 5. The lower ones are alienated, they're separate, they're personal. The larger, better functioning organizations focus on partnerships and teams. The theme, if we had to make it popular that what people would understand, the lowest case was that life in general sucks. People were miserable. They had bigger problems than the organization about eating, sleeping, healthcare, etc. The next higher level is their life might have been terrible, but the organization might be okay. The third case is I'm great, I'm doing well, I'm making money. Everybody else may not be where I am. Why do you take that? Because you're insecure and you feel threatened. The good high performance areas, we move into a we're great mindset. The corporation's doing well. The highest level is not only is the corporation doing well, other groups that we associate with are doing well. And visually, for you visual learners, here's how you can represent this. Here's the organization, and here's all these individuals here. Here we have at the second level, here's the organization. We have individuals working around that, but we know this is a pretty good thing because we're kind of connected in one way through the organization. Now, the third level, we really do have a connection to the organization, but we're still a little bit separate from each other, but we still are doing well. Now, in these higher ends, this becomes more of a mosaic where we are connected as an organization, and the highest level organizations of like mind are connected. In the United States, very successful for-profit not-for-profit organizations are at this level. We have many organizations like Apple that may have been like this. Google was like this. Google's kind of degenerating as they've gotten bigger. The top level organizations really share knowledge, and that's why everybody there knows what's going on. It's transparent. Below that, everybody kind of hoards their knowledge because they're insecure about their future. So they're careful and not trusting to share what they know because they figure if they share what they know, they might be out of a job or be in jeopardy. So again, this is just my summary slide to kind of go through and show you what I think is there. I'm going to pause here for a second and go back to this. I'll have to jump to this again. Okay, is anybody have any questions on this? Just now that I'm here, I'll stop sharing my screen so I have a better view of you. So is anybody
Yes,
have any questions?
Yes, I do have a question.
Please.
I would like to know, I would like you to give us examples of the companies. You mentioned the not-for-profits in America that are at level 5. Would you please give us some examples of those not-for-profit organizations? Thank you.
Those are, for the most part, that's a very good question. Those, for the most part, are the organizations that deal with the environment. The Wildlife Federation, all the not-for-profits have a common goal to make the world better. They're trying to make it so that the people, not only the United States are going to do well, but the rest of the world to deal with that. So I would say for the most part, it's the not-for-profits that are into that situation. In the United States, not-for-profit companies by law cannot make a profit. So any monies that they secure have to be used for the betterment all the way around. So, so all of those not-for-profits at the top, the one I like to throw out is the Wildlife Federation. We could talk about organizations like Greenpeace, you know, those sorts of things, because they have a lot of allies connected with others. People are very concerned. There's very little difference between the people at top and the people who are working underneath. They're all driven by a common interest and a common cultural growth. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And so, you know, again, my job is to expose you to these ideas. Logan is widely used for people to start the conversation. And of course, the people that are down in level 3 or below, or it's mostly level 3, the executives don't want to hear it. And, they think everything's perfect. Well, in their world, it is. They're in a group think, and the people they talk to are the people who are beneath them. I did a presentation a number of years ago for the Council of Independent Colleges in the United States. There were 256 college presidents there, all of them white, all of them over 6 feet in height, all of them going to Ivy League schools, all of them have ancestry to the Mayflower, this old British Protestant, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant background who've come to the United States. And the head president was a very interesting man. And he said, American university presidents, after 6 years, go crazy. So I raised my hand because I was doing a presentation on technology there. I said, I'm not a college president, and I am not over 6 foot. I'm 5'10". I said, I am not derived from the Mayflower. My relatives have come from Eastern Europe for the most part. But I said, my question is, why do they go crazy? And you made that blanket statement. And he said is that everybody coming into power generally has, any leader coming in has good intentions. But after a while, the people that support them know what angers or what really upsets the leader. And after about 5 or 6 years, the inner circle doesn't tell the leader the truth. They only tell the leader what they want to hear. A good example you might want to go through is what's currently happening with this Russia-Ukraine situation. The leaders are fearful to tell the subordinates are fearful to tell the leader what is really happening. So what happens is this is when, again, the president goes crazy. And at that point, the president should probably leave that institution, go somewhere else, and start all over again, where you have honest interchange of ideas and thoughts without perceptions of punitive responses for saying something.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, please?
On the same topic, you mentioned in the United States that
Who is
organizations.
Who's
Yes,
this speaking?
This is Katama.
Okay, very good. I can't see. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Continue.
Here I am. You mentioned like the Greenpeace and the environment-related organizations are sort of at a higher level, and because they understood their common areas of interest, and their knowledge level is so high. But similar patterns like the global environmental issues is now seriously suffering from, well, there is a good knowledge about environment and the crisis we are heading to, but there is sort of lack of consensus around it. And what makes this sort of understanding, having an understanding and not really being coherent?
Two different issues here. Sheila asked what organizations get into this. Common cultural organizations are there. They are separate from the rest of the world. All the rest of the world is not motivated about doing good and making us a better planet, better people. Other organizations are worried about power or profiteering and money. Those are conflicting cultures that are there. So what I was referring to is those not-for-profits are connected because they have a common goal. What's good for them works. Others, corporations, are out about themselves. They're down at level 3 at best because they're about making money for themselves. They do this by getting individuals to be able to compete against one another. And particularly in the United States, if you're in the technology field or business field, you stay in your job 2.5 years before you go to another organization to get paid more or to make more money. Not for profits, people tend to stay there for much longer. In Europe, it tends to be a little bit more stable. The European countries, and I could speak to that, I know more about that, They tend to be at a higher level, possibly at the level 4, but they're different cultures. You have to look at them individually. And so we have different models here. We can look at it from the profession, different professions. You can look at it from different genres like not-for-profits in environment, or we can look at it for capitalist countries, and each of those have a different profile. That's what makes it real interesting. And I'm exposing you to this, so when you do your research, all these things, you could take this model and apply it to your country or your situation and see where it applies and where it doesn't apply and give your dimensional spin on it. And that's what's fascinating. You might find two or three dynamics going on at the same time. So that's what's interesting. And that's why I try to get you interested to see theories are theories. What makes theories wonderful for me, they're a guide to open up the topic for discussion. It gives an insight as to what causes something to happen or what could happen or should happen. And that's why it gets exciting.
Thank you.
Let me see, I can go back here again. We'll go back and I'll have to go back and scroll through all my, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get this for a second. Let me try this one if I can get in this way. I think my PowerPoint, I could do this better. Okay, I found a solution to my dilemma here, so we'll see what happens here. And give me 1 second here, and then I should be good. Okay, so I'm going to go back in. I'm going to share my screen again, and I think I found a solution to my problem. The problem solver that I am. Now I could see you, and you could see me. How's that? That good? Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I finally, this is better. Okay, I finally figured this out. You know, it's interesting. I've gone through three PhD programs, and everybody asked me, says, you have expertise. And I said, 90% of the questions people ask me, I never heard before. Getting a PhD is a license to learn and take your skill sets to analyze a situation, draw from your knowledge, and provide a reasonably structured and methodologically consistent argument. Here's an interesting sideline here as to one of the reasons why we don't play well with each other. Some of you may have read this or may know this, but there's been a psychologist named George Miller wrote an article way back in 1956 called The Magical Number 7 ± 2. And he talks about, as humans, we have limits to our processing capacity that we're not even aware of. And he found that 7 is a magical number for humans. It's the number of chunks of information a person can hold in working memory at the same time. It's very difficult to hold more than that. A chunk is a unit of some kind. It could be a letter, a word, or short sentence. Miller examined short-term memory tasks and found that typical subjects could hold about 7 chunks in memory at once. This was true whether the subjects were holding 7 letters in memory, 7 numbers, or 7 words. That is why in the United States, for the most part, we have telephone numbers that satisfy this. It is 7 numbers plus 3 for an area code. So 7 ± 2 will give us exactly 9, which is well within the realm. Our social security numbers in the United States are 9 digits. That's 7 + 2. In the United States, as throughout the world, license plate numbers are not over 7 digits. When you go to a ATM machine at a bank, you will see that the menu choices are now no more than 7 choices, because that's, as humans, what we process. So it was a huge discovery, and everybody has applied this whole thing. And you will see that good PowerPoint slides will have no more than 7 bullets at a time, because we can't digest it. If it's less than 7 or 4, we don't think it's important. If it's more than that, it's too busy and we can't process this. So that's why in our minds, we naturally organize things. This is most of us. Some people have photographic memories and it doesn't matter. Some people are gifted in other ways, but for the bulk of us, it's this magic number 7 or 2. So we could take a number such as this, these two numbers, the 741921945. Most people would take this to memorize this, would break it up into groups. 7, then you would have 1492, because in the United States or America, that's when Columbus allegedly touched ground in Santo Domingo. And 1945 is where World War II ended. But the point is, we all have our own techniques to store digits by breaking it into chunks that are less than its original number. Pretty interesting concept. So I just put that out there to see why and how, and good knowledge management systems are designed to take things and put things into place such that we are able to universalize how we view things. When we have information systems, what we should be doing is designing systems that convey the same message to everyone, not that we have to go through and interpret and see what message is meant. For example, and I'll talk about this later, in the United States, web pages are blue or translucent for the most part as backgrounds. Culturally, blue is a color that Americans are familiar with. In the Middle East, it is a gold color or a tan color or a brown color. You'll see web pages there are gold, brown, tan. And in the Eastern Europe, browns, pinks, and like institutional green, I like to call it, our colors frequently populate web pages there. And so when you get into a web page, if you provide a cultural background, it conveys different messages. Different navigation systems for different cultures. The United States uses drop-down menus. Europe is familiar with floating menus. All these things are based culturally. And if we have an information system, if they recognize by your IP address where you're located, if it comes up in a browser format that's culturally consistent to where you are, it makes a whole lot more sense, and that information is conveyed in a more accurate way. If we as humans look at text data, as I'm putting up on these slides, our eyes are structurally sound that the most we can do is read 1,000 characters per second. If I take numbers and letters in text form, maximum 1,000 characters per second. If I'm speaking to you, your mind and your ears are set up for 750 words per minute. If I talk slower than 750 per minute, like I'm doing now intentionally, what happens is your mind goes somewhere else. If I talk much faster than 750 words per minute, as fast as I can, you can't absorb what is being said. 750 is the maximum. And if it's below that or greater than that, your mind takes over because you're wired at that level and you start thinking about other things and daydreaming. But when you show a graphic of something, a picture of something, your mind is taxed to the max without being constrained by your ears and your eyes with characters. Abstraction will allow you to process the equivalent to 40 million characters per second with a graph. And that is why when we went to graphics in this Windows environment, all our productivity increased. Graphics is very important. A graph that goes up tells us that it's good, it's going up, or something is increasing, I should say. If a graph points down, it says something bad is happening or something is decreasing. Very powerful tool. We have found this out based on Miller's work as to how we process information. But when we look at how we do this, we have interesting other factors that affect how we process and how we view information. Culture, which I'll be talking about, and I'll continue talking about that, is huge. All of us see things based upon how we grew up, what our values are, and how our religious frames happen to be, etc. We have natural biases as a result, but we need to identify those biases, because biases, as they are go into our data sets, the data sets reflect bias, and we have to recognize that. We change, frames change. Thomas Kohun had written a book in the 60s called The Scientific Revolution. And that book talks about paradigm changes and how things go from the old to the new. When do we make this change? We have to realize eventually new replaces what was there, only when it outperforms that. What we're experiencing now in our world is this issue of trust. We don't know what's real and not real. We have memes that are fake memes that actually go out there and make it look like me, but yet it says things that is not coming out of my mouth that are actually put into place. Very interesting. And then we have ethical, moral, legal barriers. And I have a couple website references you might want to check later about the Chinese. In the United States, we have very strong intellectual property laws. In China, intellectual property and intellectual expression is regarded as something different. If you take what I say, or if you take something that I make, their culture allows reuse of it to improve it. Our culture, my culture, does not allow that. We have to recognize that my laws may or may not apply. My values may or may not apply in other cultures. Other cultures will take what I say and repeat it as a form of flattery. In the United States, it's regarded as plagiarism. So we have to deal with these things when we're in a global world. Here's an interesting theory that was disclosed a number of years ago that talks about inherent bias that we have, and we all are biased. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a type of cognitive bias in which people believe that they are smarter and more capable than they really are. Essentially, low ability people do not possess the skills needed to recognize their own incompetence. The combination of poor self-awareness and low cognitive ability leads them to overestimate their own capabilities. This isn't my theory. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'm sure as you read this, you can relate to people that falls into this. And this is a very interesting analysis that they formed. And, you know, they have set up self-estimated analysis as indicated by this red line, and the green line is an actual accurate determinant of the relationship between knowledge and expertise. And it says essentially that when you know very little, some people think they know a lot more than they know. And the interesting thing is that over time, you will see that as people gain knowledge, their expertise goes up. And the people who self-estimate, eventually over a period of time, what they do actually know is less than what actually they think they know. And it's interesting that people who enter PhD programs are at this level right here, because you know a lot more than you think you know, and you think that this degree may or may not be the silver bullet that'll take you to the next level. And in reality, what happens is getting a PhD is the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know, and you know nothing. That's a very interesting phenomenon. Here's another diagram that talks about, again, the idea of the confidence of what you think you know versus your experience. And it starts out that people who don't know a whole lot or have very little experience think they know more than they know. And the more they learn and the more they experience things, they realize they know nothing. And then eventually it comes back up again. So interesting. This started off as a result of doctoral research, and it evolved to something that's still studied to this day. But the idea of what causes this Dunning-Kruger effect is fascinating, because it's not that people are dumb or idiot, but it says that when you start a new position, new job, you are incompetent because you don't have that experience. So to survive based on that level 3 of Logan, you have to overestimate your own skill levels and say, I can do anything, because if I don't, I'm going to be out of here. Another factor that they found to be the case is that people don't genuinely recognize the skill or expertise of other people because they're insecure. They're afraid to acknowledge that somebody might know something, and they're afraid to ask them for help because they're afraid that they don't want the other person to know that they're learning and they don't know this very well. And finally, they fail to recognize their own mistakes or lack of skill because they don't know they're making a mistake. They don't even have the context to deal with this. So again, this is a very interesting study. A lot of work has been done on this. So Dunning suggests that deficits in skill and expertise creates a two-pronged problem. First, these deficits cause people to perform poorly in a domain which they are incompetent. Secondly, their erroneous and deficient knowledge makes them unable to recognize their mistakes. And to me, in the corporate world, this happens frequently in the government, that this is always the case. In my world, academic administration are out of touch with what happens in the classroom, in the research world, that they rise to a level of severe what we call deficiency of knowledge, and don't even know and don't realize. This is my example about university presidents. Okay, are any questions on this so far? You know, this is a very interesting idea, this idea of metacognition. And the idea is that it's, and here's my speech to you as a experienced professor who has made every mistake there is to make over my 40-some years of experience on this one. Self-awareness is key, and being able to acknowledge what you know well and what you don't know with some degree of humility, and being able to listen and learn really makes a huge difference overall. So this idea of metacognition is extremely important. The idea of overconfidence is really problematic. But anyway, this slide just kind of talks about what I just said. But Dunning and Kruger is a nasty thing. I see it every day in my work environment and the consulting I do when I'm asked to comment and make reports on things that I observe. But essentially, it's very simple. Keep learning and practicing. You're all doing this right now. You never know everything about anything, so you need to keep studying something. The idea is that I like to tell my PhD students, once you enter a PhD program, you give up your right to an opinion. You need to substantiate everything you say with the literature and data. You just can't say something for the sake of saying something. So you need to keep learning and practicing. You need to get feedback from others to see how you're doing and to get their input. It's always interesting to get a different cultural perspective to make you aware of something that you might have missed that's not part of your, quote, situational awareness. Question what you do know. Is this the correct view? My opinions have so changed. My professional positions have changed over the 40 years I have been doing this, because the more I learn, the more I realize that my views have to change accordingly. I learned from you folks, and I hope you learn from each other. That's why I do what I do. And finally and last, it's all about listening and appreciating other ideas. I celebrate diversity of ideas and thoughts because it really provides a different perspective for me. Polanyi is a scholar that is prominent in knowledge management. You're going to get this if you haven't already. Had spoken about this his entire life and written a couple books on this. And he's the one who has been named the father of tacit knowledge, identifying it. He simply says is that we don't know what we do know. We don't know what we do know. We can't even articulate it. Based on our cultural experiences, our education, our background, how we grew up, our applied experiences, We don't know what we know. We know a lot more than it even comes out. And that's why when you're in a conversation, as you start the conversation, you don't know what you're going to say next, because this is where this comes together. It's that silent knowledge that appears. Your words, your choices, your examples appear, not pre-thought. It comes out from this tacit knowledge. And this is prevalent in Tao philosophy from the East. Okay, questions on this? Katima, I ask you because you're the spokesperson now. And Sheila, what do you think? Do you agree with this, disagree with this? Or are you all taking breaks right now?
This is Grace here.
Grace, I see you. Yeah, I hear you. Yes.
I was waiting for you to say something about the Tao philosophy, because I saw that was the next statement.
That's the next time we meet, I'll talk about, because I can go on forever on that. But the Tao philosophy, it's all about self-inflection, about knowing who you are, and you can't judge others by who you are. You have to see others, and when you learn about others, that brings it into redefining who you are.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I'll give you an example. I try to know a little bit about, and I don't know much about anything in the big picture of things, but we have a number of students from different cultures here, and we have a number of Saudi students here. And the Saudis, when they come here, they obviously come from a different social structure, a patriarchal authoritative structure with a king. They're Muslims and very strict Quran following peoples. And they come up and say to me, and because I'm quite open, they say Americans are racist. And I look at them, I go, what's your point? Yes, we are. When the Irish came into the United States, they were discriminated against. You could not get a job. It says job available, Irish need not apply. They gave names to the Irish. They called them mix, they called them whatever. Then came the Italians. Signs on the doors said, we have jobs open, Italians need not apply. They gave them horrible names. Dagos, WOPs, W-O-P, without papers. Then comes the Polish people, Eastern Europeans. The Polish people come. They call them Polacks. They call them hunkies because they did manual labor. It goes on and on and on. The Vietnamese people came here and they all called them Charlie, or had some horrible names on there. And then I asked, I said, what do you call people that migrate into Saudi Arabia? He goes, we don't have names. And I said, people do migrate into Saudi Arabia because, as my understanding under Islam, if you do a pilgrimage to Mecca and part of the Hajj, once you stay there, you come to Saudi Arabia. And if you choose to stay in Saudi Arabia, you become a citizen of the state and are part of the Muslim community. And he says, well, yes, that's true. I says, what do you call those people who migrate in? He goes, we don't. And I looked at him and I says, I think you do have a name for that. It's called Tarsh Bahon. There's silence. And he goes, Tarsh Bahon. He goes, am I mispronouncing that? And he looks at me in shock. He goes, how do you know what that is? And I says, I'm Fred. I know a little bit about everything. I said, I know everything. Tarsh Bahon means vomit from the sea. So I said that, and I go, even in the US, we don't have even terms that bad. You have terms like that about your peoples there, and you choose not to look at yourselves, but you look at others in terms of how we handle things. But what I'm saying is that you eventually absorb those people as they adhere to the Saudi culture. Same thing in the United States. As people adopt to the American culture, they are integrated and there is no thing. So getting back to that Taoist philosophy, it's about you can't know others until you know yourself. And when you know yourself, you have to know others and incorporate some of the others into yourself. So that's my long-winded response to something that we may talk about later on. But does that make any sense to you?
Yes, I've had a bit of the Tao conversation in the philosophy, and I just like how the different people you've introduced have there's just a way this is introducing us into the whole world of how our PhD might be like, just being able to accommodate every opinion and understanding each other. We come from different cultures. So I'm just trying to see how, or rather why we're learning this.
Yeah,
when we have a class that already has people from different diverse cultures. Yeah, so I think
we are about knowledge management, and knowledge has to be transferred. We are a global world, whether you like it or I like it, we are a global world. I have to understand and be sensitive to where you come from, as you have to be sensitive to where I come from. That's why it's critical. And when we design systems, and we will be part of the design of artificial intelligence systems. So if we don't account for our individual biases and differences, those systems will incorporate those biases, and we will be in an incredibly difficult place. And that's why this is so important. And that's, to me, the root of knowledge management. You can tell I get passionate and excited about this because I'm so frightened of artificial intelligence being self-learning to have all the bad stuff as well as the good. And that's what we have to account for and try to eradicate that as much as possible. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, it leads me to one more question about what you said when it comes to artificial intelligence. When you're talking about the history and explaining that, is it since 2018 we got into the artificial big data driven?
Yeah.
Does that mean
more mainstream? It became more mainstream, right?
More mainstream. So that means now we've moved to artificial intelligence, and all the others that were there before get incorporated into that. Is that
correct?
What you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So we're now all going to be contributors of artificial intelligence.
And we'll all be serious contributors in that. And if we don't, as professionals, stand up to provide for filters for bias, it's going to be a frightening world. And because, again, the AI has to recognize we all live in different environments, and it has to be adjusted and avoid disinformation and misinformation, so we don't create problems where there were no problems just because something is misconstrued.
Thank you.
But again, we're not going to be writing, for the most part, algorithms for AI, but right now we have generators. I could talk into my machine at this point in time. I could get machine language that's generated from that and actually have a functional program. I don't want to say something absurd and have some radical group making statements, and all of a sudden this becomes the norm for decision making. So again, that's my exaggerated example there. So. Okay, let me go on, continue with this, and then I'll stop and give you a break for a few minutes, and then we'll continue after that. Let me do a couple more things here. So we have knowledge bias, which I've been talking about. Here's 7 types of misinformation. Again, at your own time, you can go back and look at the, go in YouTube and pick this stuff out. But just a screenshot from this one. It's not really very sophisticated, but here's different types of misinformation. Let me move this over here. I'll try to. There we go. And let me blow this up for you a little bit so you can see this and read this. 7 different types of disinformation here. Satire or parody as a joke. There's no intention to cause harm, but it's the idea, but it has potential to fool. We can do a parody on something. Somebody might think that the satire is real, but there's no ill intent is done. Misleading content, misleading use of information to frame an issue or an individual. We all do this to a certain extent when we write papers. We read an article, we take it and bend it to make our point quite clear. But it's not to create harm. It's just to reinforce what our views happen to be. There's imposter content, when genuine sources are impersonated, where somebody takes on the role of an expert where they're not an expert. You see this in medical sites, websites, and et cetera, that people have authority and they really don't. You have fabricated content where new content is 100% false, designed to deceive and do harm. Very frightening, the memes that are out there. People get alienated. You see this in social media now, where we have radicalized websites and radicalized blogs that tend to bias people, and this has political developments, and we have schisms in countries from this. We have false connection when headlines and visuals or captions don't support the content. When we have newspapers have a headline just to get our interest, and then the content is something different. It's there to draw us in and deal with that. We have false context here, where genuine context is shared with false contextual information. Again, they have an evil argument or a bad argument. They'll take factual data that is or decontextualized, as I like to say, and put in a different context. And finally, we have where genuine information and imagery is manipulated to deceive, and those memes. You could take a political representative, a president of a country, a chancellor, having a meme speak differently and put different voiceover on it and to deceive that. Misinformation to me is unintentional misrepresentation or distortion of what is genuine. Disinformation happens to be the intentional misrepresentation of that information. And with technology and why you're doing this degree, you will see the goods and bads, and the bads of technology come out with disinformation, unintended results with misinformation by just putting it in an inappropriate context. Okay, so whoops, I reduced that a little bit too much here. Let me go back to 100%, and then, okay, so I just want to give you that. You can go on if you want to deal with this. I have put into place here 3 references for 3 videos. Claire Ward, pretty well-known English lady, had talked about more than fake news and disinformation ecosystem, how it's generated. Pretty interesting, relatively short YouTube video. I highly encourage you to do that in your own time. The EU really has a conscious effort on disinformation. Here's how they are dealing with this rapid alert system when a disinformation site is recognized and an alert system is put out there, so it is not ported into an artificial intelligence, automated intelligence gathering system. Kahneman and Tversky generally are regarded as premier scholars who've done work in heuristics. Heuristics to me always meant a rule of thumb, the way we make decisions. Heuristics are what go into machine learning and artificial intelligence. Heuristics are ways we represent things and how we frame things. And they talk about in this video the biases that go into this. I will give you more, and there's some references to their articles. They are highly influential on their pioneering work. They have heuristics like the availability heuristic. When we have to make a quick decision, we take what's currently available to help with a quick decision. We have something representative, this heuristic, representing who we are, our biases that we went through. And they strongly want us to recognize how and why we should filter out these biases when we make quick and dirty decisions. This is a last one is trust in research, and it's called the ethics of knowledge production. This is a very interesting YouTube video. I encourage you to look at this one, because right now there's a huge problem in knowledge production in academia and the research world as to questioning whether the research is really representative of what's out there. So generally now in the media, when new research results are announced, there is always a disclaimer. You always have to look at the data that was used to generate that particular research. And who sponsored that research? Was it sponsored by pharmaceutical companies selling their product? Was it sponsored by a political entity? Was it sponsored by corporate money? Were people paid to provide this stuff? Or is it done blindly in terms of what we would call traditional academic research? This gray video is a little bit longer, but it's very good to make us aware of this. This is so important to me to understand and recognize this bias in knowledge management. Okay, I'm going to take, since I've been doing this with you for an hour and a half, we'll take a 10-minute break or so. So in 10 minutes, we'll reconvene, go do what you have to do, get a cup of coffee, tea, scotch, wine, whatever you do. And but if you have wine, you have to share it with all of us. And we can talk about this. So we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. So at 10 minutes from now, we'll be back in. Felix, how are you? You good? You following everything?
Yes, we are doing. I'm doing well.
You find this interesting, or are you bored just going through the motions like all my students?
Yes, I'm enjoying it, but I'm learning. It's like a new phase, but I'm picking up. And I appreciate the examples that you gave.
Yeah, I think I'll talk a little bit in a second about that. I believe we all learn through metaphor, through examples. We have to have something concrete to be able to make sense out of all this.
That's right.
Okay, very good. So now we got to go back to the boring presentation, the slides, the god-awful PowerPoint slides. Is everybody back, I hope? Hello?
Yeah, I'm back,
Yes.
Katama.
I'm back, Sheila.
All I see is your names listing up there. I can't see, so you have to communicate. Remember my whole thing about cultural communication here? So it's like I'm talking to myself. I feel like I'm talking to my wife now. Don't make me feel that way. Sometimes when I talk to her, I turn around, I talk to the wall, and I said, this is as reasonable response as I get. So there you go. Okay, here's something that's kind of, again, interesting to me. I've been using this for quite a while. There's something called a Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Some of you may have been exposed to in the past. And according to this hypothesis, our language, and here's where it gets about language, and each culture has a different language. And again, it doesn't have to be a national culture or an ethnic culture. It could be a professional culture. It influences and shapes our cultural reality by limiting our thought processes. And a good example of this Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, how sexist language influences the way in which our society views men and women. For instance, we use words like fireman, policeman, and we say male nurse as opposed to just nurse. This reflects our deep biases without us even thinking about it. And keep in mind that if this is ported into an artificial intelligence system, whether you're a man or a woman, this is how it comes out because the algorithms are based on this. This is a small but significant example of this. In linguistics, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis states there are certain thoughts of an individual in one language that cannot be understood by those who live in another language. Way words are set up, for example, in English, if you speak English, words can have radically different meanings. For example, I can use the word disk. If you're a computer person, you're going to think of it as a storage device. I can use the word disk, and if you are a physician, a doctor of the back, you're going to think of it of a spinal disc. If you are somebody who listens to music, you will think of it as a way that a media by which music is stored. So again, we have to recognize that each one of us has a different interpretation and a language meaning. And it's my example about Deloitte Touche and IBM using the word system has a different connotation, whether it's business or whether it's engineering. And this is really an important point that we are very much influenced by our native languages. Some languages, a word might imply a lot of different things, meanings, spiritual things, etc. In other languages, that meaning has no purpose. The Japanese in knowledge management, when you go through Nanaka and Takeuchi, they talk about the ba. And the ba is what's core to you in terms of what you know and how your cultural influences your tacit approach. And so how do you, when the Japanese hear ba, they know exactly that very sophisticated approach to what it means, as opposed to us on the outside only get a definitional approach to that. So I put here again a reference to some of the articles and examples about Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. You might want to take a look at that because it really makes a difference. By the way, there was a movie a number of years ago called Arrival. Did any of you ever see this movie called Arrival? Amy Adams was an actress in this, and it's about an alien thing lands on Earth, and they send an engineer and a linguist to deal with this to find out what it was doing. And instead of speaking a language, it had these groans, and it was like an ink blot that they found out it was communicating versus these ink blots. So anyway, in the movie, I saw this with my wife in the movie theater. And in the movie theater, as we were there listening to this whole thing, I very much embarrassed my wife, because in the movie, the engineer says to the linguist woman, the professor of linguistics, says very strongly, he says, this is where I believe it's another language, and it's reflecting, unless we know their language, we cannot understand what the message happens to be if we don't know their culture. He says, this essentially is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I stood up and I said, I'm the only one in this room that knows what the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis happens to be. Then my wife immediately pulled me down and looked at me like I was out of my mind. But I learned about this when I was doing my information science program, my PhD there. We had to take 9 graduate credits in linguistics. And I said, I don't really need this. I know Russian. I had the Cyrillic alphabet. I had other languages. Why do I have to go through this? So I reluctantly took my 9 hours in linguistics, and it changed my life. Because first of all, when you're developing natural language systems, or if you're thinking about artificial intelligence that's recognizing voice transmissions, it becomes very important. And this Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is still pronounced. So please take a look at this at your own time, because it is very interesting, and it really gives you a thought process as to when you're designing knowledge systems, or when you're trying to understand if there is a knowledge management process in place where you work or where it fails, you really have to understand professional cultural differences. When you're dealing with knowledge management, you can reduce it, as all of you want to reduce it, into this list of 8 items here. When I came to this university, one of my colleagues is a guy named John O'Banion. He wrote a book called Reorienting Rhetoric. I had no idea what rhetoric was. I mean, I knew it's the language oriented, and it was the study of argument, etc. But he wrote this book that is extremely esoteric, very academic, very boring. And he would kill me if I reduced his many, many pages into what I'm going to tell you right now. But he said, what we fail as a society is to bring 2 disparate parts of how we communicate together. And he said, some of us as students, most of us as students, like lists. Lists are wonderful because it reduces everything into something, according to Miller, that we can memorize. 7 plus or minus 2 different ways we can memorize all this, put it together, put it in our minds. We have a way to reference, we can go back to it, we can organize it, we can codify it, etc. But he argues, besides each point in a list, aside for each point in a list, that is the basis for each point in a list, there is a story. And so he said that you don't know what a list constitutes unless you know the story behind a list. And if you are a storyteller or have a story, and if you can't reduce it to a list, people won't remember it. There has to be a message that comes out of that list. So what I'm going to do now is do a very brief story for each of these 7 points in this, or 8 points in this list. So again, for every point, there should be a story, and for every story, you should be able to reduce it to less than 30 seconds to relate what the point you're trying to make. And that's why metaphors are very, very useful. Examples are very, very useful. The first point, the first part of the list, establish knowledge management projectives. You can't, in an organization, have knowledge management unless you have an idea as to what you want it to do. So you need to identify where the knowledge is coming from. So what are the key documents or business problems that need to be discussed, and what knowledge sources provide insight to solving those problems? You need to provide, and here's the key, short-term and long-term objectives that address the business problems that support the business drivers. It's not just about recording what has been done, what is being done, and what should be done, or why it was done, why it is being done, and why it should be done in the future. It changes. You need to understand what drove the change, etc. This provides context for people to deal with problems in the future. Short-term objectives seek to provide validation to the program is on the right path, along with the right long-term objectives. It's what I just said. You need to be able to see, here's the big picture. Here are the components in the short run that help us get to that big picture. And again, I always try to think in terms of Logan's model. You really want to be at level 5. Very rarely do you have a chance of getting there, but you don't want to be at levels 1, 2, or even 3. You want to move up as possible. And this helps us to get there. So you have to know what you need to get done to do that. You have to identify it, have the courage, and be able to change those objectives. The second one is you have to prepare for change. And here's the cultural part within an organization. It's not just sticking in a database or technology or a formalized system. You need to deal with a cultural hurdle. You need to show people that if you function as a common culture, you're going to be able to prosper, and everybody wins in that one. The practice that promotes knowledge is power behavior that contradicts the desired knowledge sharing, knowledge-driven culture. In other words, some people hoard what they have because they know if I share what I have, I won't be as powerful. People won't need me anymore. But the reality is the more you share, and if you create a sharing culture, your knowledge base is also going to increase. So if successfully implementing a new knowledge management program may require changes within the organization's norms and shared values. There has to be a reward structure, whether it's financial, not very effective, but recognition and empowerment of individuals. So the idea is you have to establish, the last point, a plan that minimizes the negative impact, that establishes some sort of a way to manage the cultural change. Cultural change is as important as establishing those knowledge management objectives. To establish a high, you need to establish and define a high level process. So you need to identify how you're going to do this, how it's going to be captured, categorized, and disseminated with all your people, not just the person who is the knowledge officer, etc. You need to involve everyone in this process to understand that they are part of it. And you need to run through with them how you've done this to make sure it best captures in the most effective way.
Hello.
But go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah, please, can we go to the step 2 again?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Question?
Yeah, the step 2. The third point, if you could please go over, he said the practice promotes a knowledge is power behavior that contradicts the desired knowledge sharing, knowledge-driven culture end state you are after. So I was thinking that statement also contradicts the statement you want to make. You said you want to the behavior contradicts the desired knowledge sharing, knowledge driven culture, end state you are after. I thought we want to promote that, but not to end it.
We want to promote that, and we want to
Want
say
to
that,
promote-
yeah, we want to promote it.
knowledge sharing, knowledge driven culture.
Yes, because once you're in a knowledge sharing culture, you as an individual, as well as the organization, becomes more powerful. Right now, the primary mode of operation is that individuals know knowledge is power. They hoard that knowledge and do not share it. What you need to do is shift it to say there is no fear in sharing that. You're not going to lose your job. You're not going to be discredited. Somebody else is going to get credit for what you know. And the only way that's going to happen is when you put what you know out there and it is shared, and everybody has that. Right now, people are afraid to share what they know for fear that somebody else is going to take credit and be rewarded for it. That's the culture that has to be broken and replaced with a knowledge sharing, knowledge driven culture in which everybody gains from that. And that's what Apple did. Apple and Google started by, and in Pittsburgh, we have a very large Google establishment. And if you go to the Google company, there are very few closed rooms. Everything is pretty much open, and there are very few secrets, at least in the facility in Pittsburgh. Everybody is sharing what they know, and if they overhear a conversation and they think they can help, they share and they provide that knowledge to do this, both formally and informally. And so that happens to be the goal. The United States military had a classical hierarchical approach up until about 20 years ago. Then they realized that the people who really knew at the operational level what was going on were the sergeants, the non-commissioned officers. And what they ended up doing is empowering the sergeants with the intelligence that the officers and the high-ranking people had, and allowed them to say where it was accurate and inaccurate, where it may or may not fail if they wanted to operationalize it. So they changed that whole model about having the guys at the top knew what was going, and they made the people at the bottom just operate. Now they're driving that knowledge up and down in that organization. That's what this point is referring to.
Yeah, I understand, but my point is why you've written end state. He said, because I thought that's what you are after, but the end state you have put there. He said, behavior.
The end state, that's what you want, because it isn't there now in most organizations. That's where you want to go. You want to have a knowledge sharing as your end state. You want it to be that culture. I don't know if I'm
okay. Right. I get. I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I think you
you.
Misinterpreted, or I misstated what you thought. This is your goal.
Yes.
You want it to be sharing, correct?
That's right. That's right. Okay. Thank you. God bless.
Yeah. Sorry for my long-winded response to that one. Okay, so we have to define how you want to do this, and it has to be organization-wide. And it sounds foolish, but you have to let the people know why you're doing this, and you have to let them know that they're going to have access to what's in there. That's the key, and we don't do a good job of that. We keep only accesses to the high-end people, and I'm not talking about classified material that will make or break an organization, or devastating information that an organization is being acquired by another firm that might, people might lose their jobs. That's a different story. But if it's about what the business does, about business process, that has to be shared, about mistakes that were made, about successes. You need to determine and prioritize technology needs. And again, this is fairly trivial. People come in and they say, I got a product that's going to help knowledge management. Well, that's not necessarily appropriate. Don't be quick to even suggest the purchase of technology without determining if you can do what you currently have. Sometimes it takes something like Google Docs to share things. Large organizations have gone to an extreme extent, and you can look at, I have two videos here on IBM Watson, what it really does, and about artificial intelligence and how it has been used in a different context. your organization can contract out. You don't really need to have this stuff in-house and spend unbelievable amounts of money. These two videos talk about how Watson works. Watson, IBM's AI product, essentially took a database in language that was created, that was used worldwide up until maybe 20 years ago, that is still used, but it's not emphasized, called MUMPS, Massachusetts Utility Multi-Programming Language, or M. And MUMPS was a language, it was an operating system, and it was a database that had 128 different character sets on it, which meant you could program in this language. You didn't have to convert to another language. Like, for example, most programming languages were created in English. So if you were from another culture, you had to program in English to be able to do what you needed to do. With MUMPS, you could program in your native language. But MUMPS became the basic language in healthcare, and it still is behind the scenes for patient record storage, etc. So what IBM did is they took all that data that was stored in these databases and all the medical journals on top of that is another database. They combined all this and they developed their business intelligence algorithms to literally load everything written in the medical literature for the last 100 years, starting with current going backwards. They loaded everything in. It took a long time, a couple years to be able to do that, put it into the database under this MUMP system, used their business intelligence algorithms, and then they tested it. And what they did is they chose a unique cancer case. They gave it to 10 physicians or whatever the number was and said, what would you do to treat this patient? And then they ran it through Watson. Watson not only came up with the same solutions that the physicians came up with, but unique solutions based upon everything that have been done in the last 100 years, took all this and came up with unique, better solutions than what the physicians had done. The hospitals and physicians didn't have to have that technology in-house. They could have used it, outsourced it, attached into a consortium that shared that resource, and again, added their data to it. It's almost like a wiki, but the more their data went into it, what their research was, it became more powerful and usable. That's all that the point I'm trying to make on this. You need, and here's the tough one, to assess where you currently are right now. Where are you with your people, your processes, your technology, your organizational structure, and your culture? If this is off, none of this is going to work. You need to be able to adjust and adapt and modify, either the knowledge management plan, or you need to change your culture. In many cases, it's easier to adapt your knowledge management plan than it is to change your culture. But at any rate, the culture has to be integrated into this plan. There's a German enterprise software system called SAP, Systems Application Program, used across the world. How they handle things, it works very efficiently, but it's counter to what I teach as a systems person. What SAP requires is that you change your business process to meet the structure of the SAP system. If you do that, they guarantee it's going to run your system more efficiently. SAP does not modify itself to your organization. So they're doing the opposite, taking a good product, but you have to change how you do things, your culture, your processes, everything has to be adopted and re-engineered to meet SAP. What this is suggesting, you can do that, or you can adapt your culture or adapt the knowledge management system to your culture. So either way, but most people go the way of the product with some degree of success. That takes a lot of top-down support to do that, and very difficult. 6, you need a roadmap. A roadmap is not just a plan. You need to have how long it's going to take, benchmarks along the way, milestones, dependencies. What happens if something happens, like you have COVID? Where do you go? Do you continue? Do you change how you do it? Do you do it virtually? All these things have to be taken care of. So learning roadmaps talk about the what, why, where, and the how, so that you know what has been done and how you need to do it. Microsoft has a YouTube video. They have a product and they kind of go through this, but the idea is you really want to address what, why, where, how, and how things have been done and why they should be done. To me, this is kind of tedious, but it also provides, if you have a change in employees or the organizational structure or political structure, you know where you need to modify your plan. Implementation, you already have your objectives. You got to follow it. You don't change them. Your objective should have been dynamic and agile to change as times change, but you deal with that. The next step that is really critical is mitigating all the cultural issues. But when I go out and consult and work with others, I really question whether this can be done. It certainly cannot be done overnight. When Thomas Kohun wrote his book about the structure of scientific revolution, he used as an example as to when Copernicus was able to talk about the sun being the center of our solar system, moving from the old paradigm of Ptolemy, where the Earth was the center of everything in our universe. It took thousands of years to go from the Ptolemaic system to the Copernican system that we use now. So the question is, he knew that was it. He had data to demonstrate that that happened, but it took thousands of years. He wasn't the only one to recognize that. Copernicus was the one that was able to finally provide the final data to cause that paradigm shift to go from the old to the new. How do you do that with culture? You cannot do that overnight. You could start from scratch. That would work if you're doing a startup company, but even startup companies evolve. And if startup companies that are focused on creativity don't change and get some mainstream business practice approach people in, it's not going to survive. So what you need to do is identify processes and technologies that will allow the knowledge management program to work in the context of the organization. And you need to identify what isn't working and develop a roadmap, if you don't already have the one in place, to how to fix these gaps and problems that you're occurring. This is what I do when I go into organizations. I essentially work with these 4 points, is trying to identify what they're doing, what I see from an outside point of view are potential problems, and potentially how they might address them and how they might deal with them. I would be willing to bet that most of your dissertations are going to be dealing with these when push comes to shove. They're going to be dealing with these issues, whether you define them as such. Here's the part that is trivial, but it's critical. The last one is how you know your management systems are working. You need to have benchmarks and measure that. Getting a PhD is all about measurement, measuring things and providing documents and baseline points to see if there's change, if there's value added. So the question is, how do you measure things? Douglas Hubbard wrote a book, and there's a nice YouTube video you might want to check out, or an Amazon video as a result on this book. But it's How to Measure Anything. Great book. It's short. It's entertaining, but it essentially helps you to develop measurement techniques. And I strongly suggest you get this book as part of your dissertation research, because you're going to be asked to measure something. Whether you use content analysis, whether you use secondary sources, whether you use surveys, you're going to have to measure before and after. And this is a good way to get started to look at this. So what you tend to do is measure it and see how well you performed. To me, this is interesting because a lot of data comes to this. What the data you get allows you to make changes, to improve, to do what you need to do. Okay, now the next part, applying the strategy. I'm going to have to jump out of this mode so you can see this without distortion here. This is mostly applications and examples to see how this works. And this is kind of interesting to me. Again, this is based upon examples that are out there. So all the stuff I've been saying, now you can see how it kind of works. There are many different ways the firm can use knowledge management to innovate. And it helps to define the innovation space according to what, who, how, why, and where. These are critical factors that are really, really important. If you're entering the PhD, everybody gathering data can very easily answer what and where. A PhD focuses on who and how and why. Why did this happen? How did this happen? What and where essentially are documenting. It's a matter of gathering data and restating it and putting something down. When you write a doctoral dissertation, as you will be asked to do, as you're asked to write an article to be published, these articles are historical documents, whether you perceive it or not. So when you write these articles, when you do this, you have to say something like, instead of saying today, you have to say in December of 2022, because now you are stating where and you are stating what happened. Somebody who's reading your article or your dissertation needs to know, doesn't know when it was written, doesn't know that you were talking about what was happening in that time frame. Things change. So the idea is you have to change what the firm offers in line with a traditional view of a new product or service innovation. What really worked 40, 50 years ago doesn't work now. You couldn't get a degree in engineering in vacuum tube technology. Nobody uses vacuum tubes anymore. They're into solid state circuitry using superconductors at this point in time. So you need to identify what it is and why it changed. Changing who the customer is. Right now, customers don't go into a warehouse to buy something. They do most everything online. So it's a different frame of customer and different frame of customer service, and customer has access to more research capability. Changing how you sell something, again, same thing. Supply chains are all electronically determined. Everybody can research this. Where you sell customers, it's no longer in brick and mortars. Now it's via internet sales. How do you get people to buy into this? How do you get their attention? How do you identify brands, etc.? And one way, as an example, to just deal with these simple examples that I'm providing you is something called innovation radar. And it captures ways a firm can innovate, helps define the innovation space according to what, who, how, and where. And I'll go through an example of a couple companies as to how they go about and use this. And so the idea here is the creation of substantial new value for customers and the firm by creatively changing one or more dimensions of the business. All businesses and institutions must evolve. 20 years ago, if you said online education, that was regarded as an inferior education. Now, because of synchronous capability, technology, time change, accommodation, recording, we can address that. So it is no longer there. The business has changed. Most education is done in this, as an example. Innovation, we can relate customers and sellers. And what we want to talk about, how we can differentiate differently and provide sustainable competitive advantage. You know, we have Starbucks, Dell, iPod, Apple, all changed and reacted to the changes in technology. Starbucks is a global brand. They were corner stores. Now everybody recognizes. How do they do this? How do they make this happen? Well, innovation radar, symbolized with this simple diagram, is kind of interesting. And if you'll see in the outer circle, it has where, what, who, and how. And you'll see with those basic categorizations, this codification of information. If you look at the what side of it, it talks about what's being offered. It's how whether you develop new products or services or keep the old. What platform uses these? How do you Are they interchangeable? Are they adaptable elsewhere? What solutions? If you look at the who, how do you capture the value capture the users? How do you deal with the user experiences? We have reviews now that are out there that leads individuals to go to a website or not go to a website, to buy a product or not buy a product. How do we know what customers to go after? That's the who. The how, the processes, the supply chain, the organizations. This became a big deal as we went through COVID. Organizations had to deal with these 4 dimensions and realign themselves to survive. Where do you do it? What networking? What's the presence? What's the brand? How do you reflect the brand now that you're not face to face? A good example, in the United States, we have a store that sells commodities that are overruns at major brands. And in the United States, we call this company TJ Maxx, TJ Maxx. In Europe, they have the same company, but they cannot call it TJ Maxx. The J in Europe is pronounced Ya for most of the countries that are Germanic-based languages. So they had to change the branding of that TJ Maxx to TK Maxx, because TK Maxx sounds very similar to TJ Maxx. It sounds a lot better than TYA Maxx. So that's how this innovation radar helped them to redefine and change that, but yet keeping all the other corporate values and branding pretty much the same. The logo looks exactly the same, except that the J is replaced with a K in Europe. So that's just an example. Here's Starbucks. And if you look at this diagram, and again, this is just a way to display this. And I'm using the diagram to make my case. What I made is that when we see things visually, we could look at all the words, listen to all the words I said, but this tells you where the emphasis was for Starbucks. The things that were relevant to them, the most important thing to them is the who. It's the solution, where it goes from solution all the way to value capture, the customer experience. Anywhere in the world, you see the same uniforms, you see the same lineup, the same process, some slight different product differential. But the idea, it's the customers, the customer experience, and the value capture are about the same. You'll see the presence is there to deliver that, and the brand is the same uniformly. So they use this innovation radar as a good way to see where they need to focus. And for them, it was about the customers and the customer experience, making sure that was relevant where anywhere in the world, and the brand was consistent. Walmart, big company, world's largest company overall. Big company, dominates the United States all the way around. They got hurt big time. And if you look at the diagram, look at all these categories here, Walmart is able to offer and to develop their market predominance because they're incredibly established vertical supply chain, starting off with product production in China, logistics systems with shipping and shipping containers, and delivery here in the United States, with satisfying the other goal of value capture. They cannot have value to the customer unless they have maintained that particular supply chain and offering all the name brands overall. And the customers, again, are global. The presence, it's uniform. Wherever they have a Walmart, it's consistent. Walmart's a US brand for the most part, but it's driven by the supply chain. And you could look at this diagram and quickly assess where it is, what's important and what's not important. You could bring the entire organization into that. I typically offer an exercise to do this, not to do this, but you could go through your company where you work. You might want to do this if you're teaching with your students, have them define the offering, the platform, the solution, develop their own radar as to what is important, what's not important on this one. I put some examples here how this could work, offering when iPod came in, iPod was replaced with the iPhone. iPhone changed the world in 2007, but it was the iPod started it because it took away from traditional analog technologies and put it in the domain of digitization. And that led the way for the iPhone. And with that, combining sound, photography, communication, email, apps, et cetera, et cetera. Nissan talked about modular platforms as strategic control points and how they distributed worldwide. John Deere does products for farming with tractors and heavy equipment. They had customer systems that were designed now to deal with problems all over the world. So they had to deal with intercultural issues and sand in the Middle East versus moisture in Malaysia and southern climates. Customers, the do-it-yourself thing that happened with a lot of DIY and Home Depot in the United States and other companies. Experiences. IKEA changed the way furniture is sold to become a universal brand worldwide. Universal to lower costs. They had products that you had to assemble yourself, and they had wonderful both web pages and face-to-face experiences with their warehouses. Google figured out with their systems about how you get paid and how you can go through and do research, et cetera, et cetera. Presence down below, supply chain. Dell was the first company that had just-in-time delivery for computers. You put an order for a computer, how you wanted it, it went directly to the factory, and the computer with all the parts you ordered was made custom for you. Ironically, because of COVID and supply chain breakdowns, automobile producers are doing exactly that now. You go to a dealer or online, order a car with exactly what you want. That order goes to a factory. The factory produces that, and not instantly, but a few weeks later or months later, your car shows up the way you order it, based upon a supply chain that you instigated. Presents, Starbucks are everywhere, et cetera. But these are just some examples. You can use this with your students, or if you were in that sort of environment. Here's an example of a company that failed by not doing this. TomTom, which still sells in-car GPS systems. Very few people use GPS systems because they use their phone at this point, because it's available, Google Maps, Apple Maps, etc. TomTom dominated the market in 2002 with independently used GPS systems. They still survive by selling GPS systems that come with cars that have higher end systems that is just built in. But they did not go through the same thing and did not adapt their market as others adapted it when mobile phones started pulling this in. Some of them sold their products to Apple and to Google, so they didn't invent. TomTom did not see what was happening, so they tended to not do particularly well. Cirque du Soleil out of Canada did very well by watching the world using that innovation radar, managing that knowledge, and modifying their model. And they saw traditional circuses that were popular in the US, like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, eventually go smaller and die and disappear. Yet we have the Cirque du Soleil raise their prices, redefine their target market, made it a little bit smaller, had different venues, changed what they had done, and gone global and worldwide, and made a name for themselves internationally, and have developed and driven very well by using simple techniques like innovation radar to see where they were, what changes were happening, without a lot of sophistication, using existing tools such as Google to populate that, looking at publicly available data sources. Here's an interesting series of graphs that says each product has a unique pattern. If you have good knowledge management, you can trace and follow the introduction and the immersion of and use of that particular product. So products with slow adoption, like old school record players, microwave ovens, quickly it went through a normal growth curve, and then it dropped off when everybody got them. And there was a high residual value for microwaves and record players. Costs dropped because they were readily available. We had products with fast adoption. When new technologies came in, compact discs, flash drives for storage, very quick adoption until the next technology came into place. Then it dropped off rather quickly. Fad products like Beanie Babies or some toy that comes in grows very rapidly, very difficult to get, high prices, drops off, next product comes in. And then you have the wise organizations that sustain, have product innovations. In the example here, you had PCs, then portables and laptops and tablets, and they constantly went up. When it dropped a little bit, they introduced a new product that introduced a new feature overall. We do this with other products like toothpaste. Toothpaste cleaning your teeth. Then it was toothpaste with fluoride to prevent cavities. Then it was toothpaste with breath fresheners. Then it was toothpaste with whitener. And each time they did this, they kept increasing their sales. But if you have a good knowledge management data capture system, you could see what has happened in the past to see how your product aligns itself, what it is, what you're doing wrong, and which of these you want to follow. If you're a short-term company or if you're a longer-term company like D, how do you improve and keep your company in business with product rollouts? But there are a number of tools out there that you can incorporate that are public domain that don't cost a lot, but it's really about capturing the data to do this and make success out of it. Everything's about measurement. Here's one of the models that's out there called the Bass diffusion model. I just want to show you this one. And there's two parts to this model, and you can actually capture this data. There's the innovation effect when you're introducing a new model or a new product or new something, a service, and there's the imitation effect. It doesn't take long before somebody will take your product and make a variation on it. And so you have to assess, when do you adopt your product, or when do you go on and get into a whole new marketplace? The Chinese have perfected this because their imitation effect is very quick and dirty, and they come out with better products than the original product. But this can be measured, and here's an example of using that. You use historical data and use other products that are similar to the products that you're trying to introduce and see how it evolves. You can run it in through that Bass model, and you can actually get a value for it. It's not going to be 100% right on and precise, but it's going to be a good indicator as to what products you want to get into and what the imitation factor is, where you should be the innovator or you should be the imitator. But again, this is about using historical data about analogous products similar to the one, or services to the one that you're getting into. But you can quantify this, and there's a lot of research out there that does this. So this is kind of interesting. So you can forecast and do a lot. And one of the companies that did this was AT&T, which is an international company, went out and purchased and saw the future from their perspective a number of years ago. They bought out DirecTV, which happened to be the satellite communications company that dominated the United States. So AT&T purchased that and melded their products together. So they made movies that were available through satellite and television shows available on their mobile phones. And likewise, they made internet services available both ways. So they did that. And right now, the next move is trying to get in to do comparable things that Elon Musk is doing with his satellite system that he's putting into place. And right now, that system of 64,000 satellite systems that he's putting into place is the next generation. Apple is doing exactly the same thing. They have invested and put in their new iPhone 14 the capability that if you get in trouble in a place where there is not mobile phone service, there is a satellite service that will put in an SOS message that you were able to get help, and it will allow messaging to show where your GPS location is so you can be rescued. But the point is, you can use this mass diffusion model and models like it to predict when you should be a follower, when you should be an introducer, and when you should be looking for comparable industries that should be absorbed into your industries for economies of scale and efficiency, and assessing the impacts of new technologies. Okay. I have put on this particular slideshow.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead. Let me minimize this so I can see you and talk to you. I'm going through this because you have access to this on your own. So please ask.
Yeah, please, the last slide for the, and then you go back to the slide. So I'm asking whether I can go back to the last. I didn't get the whole. The last one.
You're asking about this one?
This one, yeah. If you can please take time and take. I couldn't hear well about the mass diffusion model.
What I'm saying is there are models out there that you can research
Right,
that are based upon what is called this mass diffusion model. This model here. It's based upon this. Okay, it's based upon the mass diffusion model. If you take a model like this, there's a lot of them out there. And what this model is used for, and anyone that's even simpler for this, you use historical data. You don't even have to get real data. You want to map out what products or what services akin to what you do have been released. Then you trace how many have provided competitive products or similar products to the one that you're studying or you're researching. From that, you can gather data historically, and then you can actually get values for innovation and imitation. And once you have values for a number of similar products or similar services in education, it could be majors. Somebody might be offering a degree in electrical engineering, and somebody might be offering a degree in microprocessor engineering. You can actually get values from this. And once you have values for this, you can actually estimate market sizes as to what the potential growth happens to be. You can make forecasts from this. In my example, using the mass diffusion model, AT&T, the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, had mobile phones and they had landlines. They realized the future would not just be in mobile phones. They had to expand beyond that. So they looked at historical data and realized eventually things are migrating to satellites. Even though they use mobile cell towers right now for mobile communication, they bought DirecTV, seeing that they were related in terms of their market share was very similar to the people that used mobile phones. So they went out and purchased DirecTV. They were anticipating that Elon Musk's satellite system that's out there now with 64 low altitude satellites is going to be the future of mobile communication and entertainment. They purchased DirecTV way ahead of time, years ahead of time, before it's become a reality to have a satellite presence. Apple has done a similar thing. And so my point is you can use models if you have effective knowledge management systems of, if you know your business, know where you want to go, to know what your competition happens to be, you can make reasonable forecasts that are not going to be exact, but gives you an idea if it's economically feasible, advisable, if it's worthwhile to move in a different direction. Apple had done this, as I said, with their cell phones, that now with an Apple phone Model 14, you can actually access satellites in the case of emergency. Within a year, they're going to be offering messaging when there isn't cell phone capable. They've already partnered with a satellite system. Elon Musk did it independently. He's going to challenge everybody. So my point is, you can use knowledge-based models, knowledge management systems to take risks, to forecast what will happen or could happen, and adjust your business accordingly. Does that help explain that?
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
But to me, this is very interesting. And this is where I get so excited, because you have all this potential for yourself to see that all this is out there. And when I was growing up and going to school, I didn't have Google. I didn't have search engines to be able to access these models and try to see how can I modify it, or how can I develop it, change it to meet my particular needs. But this is a relative risk-free way to expand businesses, markets, communication using knowledge management systems. So that was my whole point behind that.
Thank you very much.
I left off here. Here's just some resources on your own. Here's the IBM. Here's the IBM Fighting Cancer YouTube. This is an interesting one. Lee has written a book on AI and the super AI. He makes it quite clear that artificial intelligence is nothing more than super pattern recognition. The Chinese is where everybody gets their data from, because they have no privacy laws. So they have established patterns from privacy dimensions, business dimensions, what clothes we wear, expressions of happiness, different skin color, different eye shapes. They have it all. The whole world buys from them. So you buy into that pattern recognition, you put it into algorithms, you can do a lot of predictive stuff. But artificial intelligence is nothing more than pattern recognition. So what this talks about, how to fight cancer, I already went over that, how Watson works and how there is a database, how it attaches to this algorithmic process. Waymo and Uber. Waymo was a product that was developed as an offshoot of Google developing autonomous cars, and they developed a LiDAR system to help guide the cars. Uber got into doing autonomous self-driving cars, which out of an operation in Pittsburgh, with this very sophisticated LiDAR, because the chief engineer left Waymo to go to Uber. Uber had a lawsuit against Waymo for stealing their intellectual property. What happened is that Uber argued, we hired a man. The man had his knowledge up here. He did not take Waymo corporate secrets. He took what he knew about knowledge management. It so happened that Waymo used that and made it into a product. Well, so did Uber. It wasn't the same product, but it was the man's intellectual property. Kind of interesting. These are funny, humorous things. It talks about conference calls and how people behave in video conferences. They're funny, meant as a joke, but they're very realistic, because that's exactly how we behave in conference calls and how people behave. And we all know that, but yet this captures this in a very humorous way. But I wanted to show you that. Here's just a diagram, a wheel of disruption. Nothing really great about this except to show that when you come out with your doctoral dissertation or an article, it is always to your advantage to come up with a table or a diagram to express what you're trying to say. People have different cognitive styles. If you can visually model what points you are trying to make in your article or your dissertation, you are that much more successful, and you are more likely to get citations of your work. I have written a few things, but I have maybe 100,000 citations of a lot of the works I have done. And again, this really helps because it breaks down language barriers, etc., as you go through and deal with this. But this is interesting because as we're all experiencing change in our lifetimes, particularly in yours and my lifetime, you see that we need a way to understand what drives change and how it's disrupted. And this is just one of many ways to demonstrate this. I just wanted to point out there's different tools. If you might want to go to YouTube and look under Kai-Fu Lee, he wrote a book, and he was referred to as the Oracle of AI. And he's unbelievable. This guy is computer science from Carnegie Mellon, where I got mine. He's was a vice president of Apple, Microsoft, and Google. unbelievable. He's the CEO of the Chinese company. He wrote a book which is very popular called AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. He has been called the Oracle of AI, very famous on there. But he says, I believe AI is going to change the world more than anything in the history of mankind, more than electricity, which is a very powerful statement. In particular, the rise of artificial intelligence will dramatically change the labor markets, a fact that is of particular concern for many workers. But he says there are 4 kinds of jobs, and here's what I'm going to conclude this part of my discussion on, that will be safe from artificial intelligence revolution. And those jobs that are safe are creative jobs, scientists, novelists, and artists, complex and strategic jobs. These include executive, the decision maker, which is a lot of value judgment, diplomat, and economist. These go well beyond what computers can process because a lot of it involves intuition, involves multiple dimensions. Empathetic and creative jobs, teacher, nanny, doctor, because the job is much greater. And again, there's multiple parts that influence that. And the crazy thing is, as yet unknown jobs, because right now people are being trained for jobs right now that don't even exist. We don't even know what these jobs are going to be. But these jobs, where all of you, I would argue, fall into this category. So we aren't going to be replaced by robots or artificial intelligence. Okay, so that's my one presentation on strategy and knowledge management. I want to have one other quick thing I want to show you, but before I get into that, do you have any questions about this? Please ask now, because I want to give you a little bit of time. I threw a lot of stuff out there, which you can go and review on your own. You could take a look at some of these and other things to make sense out of them. But is this my argument? Is everything making a little sense for you, or can you do you see where I'm going with this? Grace.
Yes, I'm here.
Is it making sense to you? Is you following what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I'm following.
Is it a little bit interesting?
Yeah, there are things I need to learn though somewhere along the way, like the bus model and the one.
No. I'm glad you said that. No. If all of you followed what I had said, just understood forget about the details, the definitions and all the detail. If you follow what I said, you're in the top 5% of the population in the world right now. If you followed what I said, your job as a student is to take one part of that and study that in depth. You're not expected to know that. You never will know all that. But if you could follow what I'm saying, if you could go through my slides in a year from now and do the same lecture to somebody else, you're there. Do you realize, using data from the US, if you have a bachelor's degree in the US, you're in the top 25% of the population. If you have a master's degree, where all of you have, you're in the top 6%. If you have a doctorate, you're in the top 0.25% of the population. 0.25%. If you follow what I'm saying, understand, for the most part, you are in the top 5% right off the top on this one. You're not expected to know all the nuances and details. When I passed my last defense for my last dissertation, my mentor put his arm on my shoulder and says, enjoy the moment. And he says, right now, when you finally complete your degree, you will know more about your subject matter than anybody in the world. That's the good news. The bad news, each subsequent day, you will know less and less and less and less. And as the world moves on, that's the way it is here all the way around. What you should be capable and able to do is to know where to look if you want to research this further, where to go to learn about this stuff. So, but if you followed me followed my reasoning, my logic, my thoughts, I'm more than pleased. You okay with that?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Felix, you get it? You with us? You're on board?
I'm with you.
Okay, you sure you're with me?
Yes, I'm with you, and I appreciate it.
Are you a
Taking
coffee
time
drinker
to
or a tea
take
drinker? Do you
me
drink
through
coffee or
once.
tea? Do you drink coffee or tea?
More of tea than coffee.
Okay, I drink a lot of coffee. That's why I'm talking fast. I drink tea too, to delude myself that I'm getting healthy. Okay, so everybody with me on this? I just want to show you two more things and then I'm going to let you go. Let me show you a couple things here. Everybody see my screen? Somebody say yes or no.
Yes.
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 Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yes,
that.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, I have all these resources here. I have from that movie Arrival, so you don't think I'm crazy. I have something on the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I have the Tversky-Kahneman article. I have the next generation of knowledge management. Some thought. I have all this stuff here that you can go through, and you know a lot on Benjamin Whorf, all these things here. You can do that at your leisure, whatever interests you. And I think my view of life is if you know something about something that somebody else may not know, you have an advantage, not because you know you're hoarding knowledge. You could talk to somebody and teach somebody something else. But I do have another very brief, I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to use this one. I have another very brief PowerPoint. It's just more procedural, just to show you there's something called the knowledge chain model, something I kind of quickly put together. And you should be able to see that. Very simple here. Let me blow this thing up so you can see it in its entirety. Very simple. Knowledge chain model, straightforward. There are primary activities and secondary activities. And knowledge acquisition, selection, generation, assimilation, and emission are part of the primary activities. Acquiring knowledge from external sources, making it suitable for subsequent use. The selection, selecting needed knowledge and making it suitable. Selection is critical. That's where you minimize that bias. You want good stuff. Knowledge generation. This is producing knowledge by discovery or taking different things that make new sense. You can learn from that. The turbojet that we use every day in our world for flying around the world only happened because of World War II. In World War II, it forced people who worked in hydraulics and the dam industry, and I know Felix works as an engineer in this stuff. The water industry, there's turbines that drive that, met with internal combustion people. They talked, and all of a sudden, the design for the jet engine came about. They took and created new knowledge from existing knowledge. Assimilation, altering the state of an organization's knowledge resources by distributing and storing acquired, selected, and generated knowledge. And knowledge emission, embedded knowledge into organizational outputs for release into the environment. Sharing what you know to make things better. Knowledge leadership are secondary activities, coordination, control, and measurement. Establishing conditions that enable and facilitate fruitful conduct of KM. That's what knowledge management CEOs, chief knowledge management officers do. Knowledge coordination, managing dependency among KM activities to ensure that proper processes and resources are brought to bear adequately at appropriate times. In other words, you always want to have access to support what you're saying, what you're learning, what decisions are being made. Ensure that for control, that needed knowledge process or resources are available in sufficient quality and quantity to security requirements. Security is huge right now. And again, you want to release what's available without divulging secrets that may jeopardize the organization and institution, particularly imperative in government for intelligence purposes. And finally, knowledge measurement, assessing the values of knowledge resources. Are you really doing what you think you're doing? Is it really helping or is it hindering things? A knowledge change model claims that various combinations and implementations of primary and secondary to lead to 4 organizational performance implications. Performance, you do better. You're more agile. You're adaptable to change. You're innovative. You can be creative. You can survive. And then you have a good reputation and control that reputation. The important point here is this is referred to as PAIR. And this is the PAIR approaches to competitiveness: performance, agility, innovation, and reputation. And when you're doing your research and when you develop your own model or theory or conclusions, you want to come up with something cute like this, something that can be quoted in the literature, something that somebody else can use, make better, or apply to a particular situation. So this one, using the knowledge chain, this PAIR, is widely used. Good thing to study to see if it works. And the question is, how do you deal with this? And how do you improve upon this? But the thing about reputation is becoming more and more important, especially with mis and disreputation that tends to be out there. So here is a model that I had used and modified again. And here's the knowledge chain model. You got leadership, you got coordination, you have control, you have measurement. And then in the center of this that drives all this is acquisition, selection, assimilation, generation, mission that becomes PAIR. This is a good model. This is good dissertation. People could take this and see as a first rule of thumb, a heuristic. Is my company doing this? If it's not, where is it failing? Do they have documentation or data, or can we prove that each of these dimensions are functioning the way they're intended? Good way to analyze and apply something. All of you could take this model, modify this model, develop your own model to do something similar. I just wanted to show you this to show what can happen. And again, here is an example about applying it. All those items, those dimensions that tend to be there. Here's the stated competitive impact on the far right: productivity, agility, innovation. On this side, we have acquisition, selection, all those modules. And what I did is I listed a whole bunch of examples, of how different companies have done this. Chaparral Steel, here's a website. You can check it out if you want to. American Airlines Sabre, 1960 system, still in use at this point in time. It's been modified 8 times over. Here's a web page. I think it's still current. Here's something on IBM's Knowledge Cockpit. Here's Ernst & Young's online consulting, all representing these different dimensions here. British Petroleum about knowledge management, how they use it for productivity. Dow Chemical Company, productivity, coordination. So you can use these modules and their impacts to see how they apply in an organization. And if some of you are going to go out and be consultants, great tool to make yourself look good. Take this model and fill in the gap in the center to see if there's value added. If there is not value added, they have a problem. So that's all I want to show in terms of my slides, but it's just some way to show how this stuff can be applied and how it can be used. And so any questions on that? So that's my approach to this stuff. What I forgot to show you one thing. I have to share my screen one more time to show you this, and then I will stop. The thing I want to show you is here's all your study materials that's out there. Start working on this. I have an assignment. We'll be coming together in 2 weeks. Obviously, you're not going to look at this all in the next 2 weeks, but over the next few weeks, look at this, please, over the holidays in particular. But I have an assignment consisting of 2 parts that I'd like you to do to be submitted through the Dropbox that I will give you feedback on, whether it's in individual feedback. I want you to go through these quickly just to kind of, see what works and if you have questions on that. And 2, I want you, based upon this social network analysis here, and if you look at some of these slides that I have up here, to go through and map your personal social network. Where do you derive your knowledge? And here is a website that gives you a tool that helps you go through and deal with this from your textbook. So I would like you to kind of go through this. This is due around December 18th. Please go through and do this. Help me out and do a paper. Again, assume audience. Assume I don't know anything. So when you start doing this, have a cover paragraph and page that explains what you're trying to do, and then provide as much detail describing either with a diagram, a tool, or through words or a chart, your individual social network and what sorts of knowledge you derive from that. Your social network involves where you work, your family, your groups, your church groups, your whatever, your hobbies, whatever that falls into that. So that is due in a couple weeks, but just so I could give you feedback before class. So it doesn't have to be the 18th. It could be upwards of the 20th, etc. So that's your assignment that I have for you to do something. I'm pretty good at giving feedback and constructive feedback overall. Questions? Katima, you have questions on everything.
Not, I mean, I will have in the next session, but enough for today.
For today, that's right. So again, but did you follow what I was saying for the most part?
Yes.
And that's all I can ask for. I'm not even asking you to agree with it. I just want you to follow it. In fact, I hope you don't agree with it. That's even more important to me. That's far more interesting to me.
Okay.
Okay. Are we good? Okay. So you know how to get a hold of me. And what we will do is you're going to meet with me again on, I believe, December 22nd at the same time we met now. So it's 15:30 Central European time and 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we should be good with that. Okay, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm going to hopefully stop the recording. We'll see if I can do this. And we'll go from there.